What exactly do you understand to have happened?
Well, it appears from the Guardian and the Mirror that Dominic Cummings, the Prime Minister's closest advisor, travelled over 200 miles to ask his elderly grandparents to look after his children when he and his wife had got coronavirus. That looks like it's in real breach of the rules. And when millions of people have sacrificed so much in order to stop the spread of coronavirus, people have not seen their loved ones, had to cancel weddings, not been able to go to the funerals of their closest relatives. It looks quite outrageous that the Prime Minister's closest advisor has done this. And frankly, if that turns out to be the case, he must go. He should either resign or the Prime Minister should sack him.
Is there any explanation that you would accept?
Well, the Prime Minister has got to obviously look at this urgently and got to make his position clear, because the buck stops with the Prime Minister on this appointment. I can't see, in my reading of the guidelines, that this is anything other than a very severe breach of those guidelines. I'm always someone who would like to hear an explanation, but I can't see how Dominic Cummings can wriggle out of this one. And I think he ought to do the decent thing today and to resign.
Could it be that it comes under exceptional circumstances, though, because we read that he needed to take his child to his parents because he was too ill, and his wife also, to look after their young child?
I don't think that's the case. Certainly not according to the guidelines that were in existence when he made this very long journey. And I think people are also asking questions about why he would go to his own parents, who were clearly in a vulnerable category. I can't see any way that this could be under some exemption. Many people have had to deal with their children and when they've been in self-isolation, when they've been abiding by the rules. I don't think there can be one rule for everyone else and a different rule from the Prime Minister's top team.
Can we look, though, for a moment at the human circumstance of this? I mean, what would you have done if you'd had a young child that obviously needed to be looked after, and both yourself and your wife weren't able to do that? What should he have done?
Well, we all have sympathy with people who have these difficult circumstances. The question is, what were the rules and what was open to him? I don't think going right across the country to elderly relatives was the solution. It certainly wasn't in the rules as far as I read them. So of course one has sympathy with people with these difficult dilemmas, but these were the sorts of things that people were facing in their millions, and I just don't think there should be an exception made for the Prime Minister's top advisor.
But specifically, what would you have suggested as a solution?
Well, I actually think he could have stayed at home with his wife and with his child. I'm pretty sure that would have been possible. And if not, maybe he should have contacted the NHS or the local authority. There are people out there who are willing to help in the community, who are trained, who are less vulnerable. In my own constituency, we've seen the council and the NHS and the voluntary services providing amazing support for those who've been self-isolating, who've been in need. And I don't see why Dominic Cummings couldn't have contacted local experts, local people who could have helped.
On a wider question, do you think the government now has the virus under control with the institution of the quarantine, with the testing, tracking and tracing? Is it under control?
Well, I hope it is. This is such a tragedy for so many people. But I fear, first of all, that we still have the crisis in our care homes. I don't believe the evidence suggests that that yet is sorted. And I'm very worried about their strategy on testing, tracing and isolation. This is essential so the lockdown can be lifted, so we can get back to something near normality. But it doesn't appear yet they have got that under control. They haven't got a proper testing, tracing and isolation strategy. They haven't geared up anywhere near enough. And without that, it's going to prove very difficult to get back to normal life. And I really urge the government, they should have been doing this weeks ago, months ago. They've been very slow throughout this crisis. They've really got to get to grips with this so we can get the schools to return, get everybody back to work. But it's in the government's court to take these final actions, which it's been so slow in doing.
Yeah, we are hearing from Professor Carl Hernigan, Director of the Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine at Oxford University. He's saying that the coronavirus is disappearing at a rate that's speeding up.
Well, I very much hope he's right. And I will listen to professors like him, scientists, and I hope we can lift the lockdown. But as the Prime Minister keeps reminding us, it's the famous R number. And while that's still very prevalent in some parts of the country, because it's not the same across the country, in the care homes, we've got to be very cautious. I think given a huge number of people who've lost their lives during this crisis, far higher than in similar countries, I think it's right to be cautious. And to listen to the scientists, absolutely, but to take a cautious approach. And I really worry that there are voices in the government who are so desperate to lift the lockdown that they're not quite listening to the advice and the evidence.